How do you actually make money when buying a home? What is the literal financial benefit in home ownership? In this video today, we are going to take a very elementary approach to explaining the concepts of home values and home equity. The reason I'm making this video is I had a conversation recently with a young naval officer who I could tell was a bit embarrassed about not understanding this concept. And my guess is that there are a lot of you out there who kind of feel the exact same way. And so we're gonna take this from a fundamental level and explain the basics of home values and home equity. Let's do it. So this term home equity quite literally is defined as the value of the home minus the total amount of debt left on the property. Value minus debt. So let's say you have a home that's worth $400,000. Now, how and why is it worth $400,000? Totally fair. When we are talking about the market value of a home, quite literally, it is defined as whatever somebody is willing to pay for it. I mean that literally, whatever somebody is willing to pay for it. Now, there are multiple factors that go into what somebody is willing to pay for it. And usually they're hyper personal, right? What matters a lot for person A may be very different than what matters for person B. As a result, we're just gonna kind of compile and simplify this idea as demand. And then there's the idea of supply. How many homes are available? Quite literally, how many homes are for sale? Because if you have an area where a lot of people want to live there, great neighborhood, great schools, and there are not many homes available or homes for sale, when one does pop up onto the market, there are gonna be people who are willing to pay more in order to get the opportunity to live in that area, right? You have a low amount of supply, but a high amount of demand, which increases the overall value of the property, which again is just quite literally what somebody is willing to pay for it. And on the flip side, if you have an area where there are a ton of homes for sale and there's not as big of a demand to be living there, well, then your property values are gonna decrease because people are gonna be willing to pay less in order to live there. A perfect example is Austin, Texas. If you go back with me to 2020, COVID's running rampant, employers are telling people to work from home. Now you have a lot of people with this great idea like, what if we move to a place where we can get more space and there's no state income tax and I can work from home? And as a result, there were a ton of people that wanted to move to Austin. But at the same time, the amount of homes that were for sale stayed the exact same. So you had this massive increase in demand where the amount of supply in available homes was really low. And as a result, the median home price in Austin, Texas surged from 2020 to 2022 as you had this influx of people. Over 40% difference. Home values were worth 40% more in 2022 than they were in 2020. And is that because homes magically became more valuable or the materials were worth more? No, it just quite literally meant people were willing to pay more to be in that home, to buy that home in Austin, Texas. As a result, home builders started to see an opportunity, right? They're like, there is so much demand, we need to build to keep up with this. And so from 2021 to 2024, thousands of homes in the Austin metro area were getting built, tons of new construction. But what happened? 2023, 2024, the world starts to return to normal a little bit. Employers are mandating that people return to the office. People are starting to move back to be closer to family. And so what happens? The demand starts to decrease dramatically, but the inventory and the supply had been built up so aggressively, the prices started to crash, right? Like we had the exact opposite happen where now we had so much inventory, but not a lot of demand. And as a result, from that peak in 2022 to 2025, the median home price dropped almost 30% in Austin. It was the complete opposite effect that we saw in a 5-year span. So as you can see, home values, much like stocks or any other investment, can be variable and volatile. There are a lot of factors that are completely out of your control that may go into the value of a home. However, when you zoom out from all the ups and downs, and you don't look at a 5-year view, but you look at a 30-year view, you would see that Austin real estate is up about 400% over the past 30 years. And that is consistent with data all across the country. And it just shows a point, which when you hold on to real estate for a long time, in general, the data would indicate that the value of your property is going to increase. But it's not just the value of your property increasing that matters. It also matters that as you are paying off your mortgage, as you are making your mortgage payments, as your home value is increasing, the amount that you owe on the property is also decreasing. And it is that compounding effect that makes real estate so powerful. So what is it that you're actually paying off? Well, in order to buy the home, again, in order to purchase this asset that's worth $400,000, again, if you're a military family using the VA loan, well, then you have to get a loan, if you're putting 0% down, a $400,000 loan in order to purchase an asset that is worth $400,000. And that idea is called the mortgage. And your mortgage is given to you by a bank or a mortgage originator, which we'll refer to from here on out as a lender. Now, this is very simplified math, because there are other fees and costs associated that won't make these numbers perfect, but I wanted to use simple numbers in order to illustrate the concept, which is when you actually purchase the home, let's say you close on the home, you now own an asset that is valued at $400,000. But at the same time, you now have $400,000 worth of debt that you're going to have to pay off over the next 30 years. And every month, you make a mortgage payment that makes that loan balance start to decrease month after month. But here's where the banks and lenders get you. In order to mitigate their risk of lending you this money, they collect the majority of their interest up front. So each mortgage payment you make has money that goes towards paying off what is known as the principal, or the actual loan amount and how much you have remaining on your balance. And the other portion goes towards paying interest. And initially, the majority of the payment goes towards paying off the interest, while just a small fraction goes towards actually paying off the principal balance. But as the loan matures, i.e. as you continue to go on, and later, again, if you have a 30-year loan, let's say you're making payments in year 19 and 20 and 21, well, now at that point, the amount of the payment that is going towards paying off interest is now minimal, and the amount going towards paying off the actual principal, the actual loan balance, is starting to get very significant, and that's where you start to see real equity gains in your property. So for example, let's say you have a 30-year fixed rate loan and your monthly mortgage payment is $2,000. Well, let's say in year one, $1,850 of the payment goes towards interest, where $150 goes towards paying off your principal balance. Well, in year two, it starts to get a little bit better. Let's say $1,750 goes towards interest, and then $250 goes towards your principal payoff. So on and so forth until you're in year 29. And now it's, let's say, $1,900 is going towards the actual principal payoff and only $100 is going towards interest. And then in year 30, now you only have $10 going to interest and you have $1,990 going towards your principal payoff. And so as you can see, as the loan matures, as time goes on, the amount of equity that you're building in the property is starting to grow really quickly. And so how do those things combine in order to create your actual equity in your real estate? Well, before we answer that, if you've found this video to be helpful and educational at all, please give it a like. It'll help the channel tremendously as we continue to grow. And if this is something that you enjoy, you like videos about easy to understand real estate education, then make sure to subscribe, because that's what we do here. But let's get back to actually answering your question now. So how do those things combine in order to actually create the equity that you have in your real estate? Well, like we've mentioned, you're going to have over time, the value of your property continue to appreciate, and you're going to have the amount of money that you owe back to your lender start to decrease. And that delta is really where you're going to start to see equity. As value increases and debt decreases, all of that delta and all that in between is your equity in the property. So let's return to that $400,000 property example with a military family who put 0% down on a VA loan. So when they purchase the home, they have a $400,000 asset and they have $400,000 of debt. Now, let's say in year 5 after closing, that property is now worth $425,000. And again, because we have interest payments so heavily up front, maybe that loan balance is now $385,000. Well, that $40,000 delta means that you have $40,000 worth of equity in the property. But let's say we get to year 20, and now that $400,000 property is worth $500,000, and the amount of loan that you have left is now $300,000. Well, now you have a full $200,000 delta, which means you have $200,000 of equity in the property. But as you're going to see, where the real value comes is by holding real estate for the long term. Because let's say you get 30 years from now, and that home that you originally bought for $400,000 is now worth $600,000, and the amount you owe on the property is no longer $400,000, it's $0. And so you have a full $600,000 delta, which is the equity you have in the property, which is you have an asset that is worth $600,000 and you owe $0 on the property. Therefore, you have $600,000 worth of equity. So as you can see, real estate can be really powerful, but this video isn't an attempt to try and convince you to buy a home. Rather, I just hope it paints in a very elementary way how the idea of home equity works and how it's benefited a lot of people in the United States. If you don't have somebody to ask these questions to, or you just want my help, if it comes to real estate education, or actually you're looking for help buying or selling your home, then I'm gonna put my contact information on the screen right now. Please feel free to call me, text me, email me, send me a DM, whatever it is, feel free to reach out and get in touch because I would love to support. We'll have all the contact information on the link in our description in the bio as well, but it would mean the world to me to get the opportunity to help you. So thank you so much. I hope this video was really educational, and I look forward to seeing you next week for more easy to understand real estate education.